and she's going to record, and that's for the video. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm recording audio. And then we go 3, 2, 1.
Boom.
Boom. Welcome everyone to G Money, real talk on everything mortgages and real estate. Today I'm here with a very close friend, Meggie Hawthorne.
Hey, you, Greg.
Oh, hey, Meggie. Real quick, I want to talk just about kind of the show itself. Again, I try to have local experts in a lot of different industries that parallel mortgages, things that we work with, just so you know kind of what's coming up. I'm hopeful of having a CPA, an estate planner, somebody about home warranties, possibly an appraiser, home inspector. I've got a whole bunch of different shows planned out. So stay tuned. And then also, if you guys ever have any suggestions or anybody that you know that may want to be on the show, please reach out to me. Let me know. Drop me a DM, an email, greg@apmloan.com. And without further ado, we're rocking. We're rocking here with Meggie.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. It's such a privilege and a pleasure.
Oh, goodness. Well, you're the rock star, Meggie, and that's what I want to say is, we met, years blur, so we'll say 6 years ago-ish. I don't know.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and you met through the chamber with Sarah, and with that, we got acquainted, and I don't want to say we started being best friends and doing karate in the garage, but we pretty much hit it off pretty soon thereafter. So it's been amazing. And, I love working with you for so many different reasons. And, you're very professional, you're very intelligent, you're very well spoken. And I mean, I can go on. And for those, many, many reasons, I've used you in purchasing one of my personal properties as well. And the art of negotiation, you got it.
That's where the magic happens. I truly enjoy the contract portion, and the negotiating part is definitely my jam.
Yeah. Well, magic doesn't happen overnight. So why don't you, if you feel good, share as much as you want. How did you get into this crazy industry?
Sure. So, a number of years ago, I was working for a company. It was corporate America setting in which my responsibility was to take on a book of accounts, which happened to be all of Kaiser Permanente nationwide. And these accounts were given to me, and my goal was to build on what we were already providing them. So my main mission was to grow those accounts. And what I found in my experience working for corporate America is it was not for me. And yet, what I appreciate about the experience is that even though I identified it wasn't the right setting for me, it absolutely pointed me in the direction that is the right setting for me, which happens to be real estate and helping those that are looking to invest, whether that's, buying a primary residence, a secondary residence, or even a rental income property. Mm-hmm. So when I was working for corporate America, I'm calling all of these different facilities throughout the nation, and my objective is to build relationships with these people because the products that we're providing them have no emotional component to them. We're talking, back in the day, chart labels and wristbands and things that I don't think that there's really no emotional component there. So these are, commodities, and we have plenty of competitors that are selling similar products. So what exactly would I be able to do in order to increase the volume of products in which we're selling to these, clients? So I found that the best method was to build the relationship, to understand what these nurses, for example, whether they were in NICU or ER, what is it that is most frustrating? What is it that's most helpful? Because I don't understand the world that they live and work in, but I do want to understand it, because when coming from a place of curiosity, I really have the ability to understand what their needs are and how we can meet them.
Wow. I love it. I feel like with something like that, I mean, it's inspiring just listening to you, but it also like brings me back of this is why real estate is not for everyone. There's so many different hats that you play. Some people think, it's just selling something and the house sells itself. Then there's the transactional part of you're just good at paperwork. And then there's the problem solver of the house doesn't appraise, or there's repairs that need to be done, or you have a crazy situation with the sellers and you have to overcome that. It is literally a juggling experience of all of that. and I'm sure much more than I do, you can definitely attest to that and probably share in some of those crazy experiences. But where I've seen you personally, and again, it's through twofold. One, working with you and the communication that we have throughout the process from the time that the property is accepted in contract of how we work together. One, I love that you trust me and you allow me to stay in my lane and not micromanage what I'm doing. When I say I've got this, I've got the appraisal ordered, I've got this taken care of, I've got the underwriting approval, there's no secondary or third questioning of, well, tell me what conditions you have and how long is this going to take? It's just like, okay, I trust Greg to do his job. I'm going to continue on with the other things that I need to do. And then there's the other side of that where, again, it's not just working with you, but also personally being vested, where maybe I did have the emotional tie of, okay, now I'm going to buy a home for myself. Let me see how Meggie brings the paperwork to me, presents it to me. There was a house that, if you recall, Little Cabrillo that we really, really fell in love with. And unfortunately, we got beat out by a cash offer. And so it was, of course, disappointing, but at the same time, it was, let's regroup and how are we going to get into the next one? We couldn't overcome a cash offer. I mean, cash is cash. And so,
100%.
There was no disappointment in that of like, oh, they were financing and we were the same and ours just didn't present as well. I think it was just understanding that here's why, and let's move on to the next. And the professionalism of working with you on both the dynamics are just amazing. And so, sounds like your experience of how you got started definitely has shaped you into what you do now. So.
Absolutely. Going back to my my sales job, I was making an hourly wage, and then as I grew my accounts, of course, I was receiving commissions on that growth. And year after year, I would make it to the President's Club, where they'd treat us to these very exciting international trips that varied year over year. And although I felt very proud of my accomplishments, there was a little piece of me that was still missing because I couldn't emotionally connect to that product. And I think it was exactly what I needed in that moment or during that time. And I think the best takeaway from that was it was very clearly defined that I do have a very sharp ability to take the time to understand people. I think when we're younger, toddlers, we're asking a lot of whys, right? Why?
That's my daughter Reagan. Every day, I can, yes. Right now, we are in the why phase, and I shared with her the other day. I was like, honey, I love that you ask why so many times, but today we're going to limit it to about 10 times. But her curiosity, no, I love it. And I don't want her to stop asking why. So
I encourage the questions because the beauty behind the questions is the curiosity.
Yeah.
If we take a moment to understand, rather than asking whys, when we're younger, and switching over to what and how. Those two questions are so incredibly impactful because going back to negotiating in contracts, if I'm representing a buyer and I know my buyer is dying to get their offer accepted, it's very clear to me that I need to guide them through this process. But in order to do so, I need to get to know the seller. However, I need to honor the relationship the seller has with their listing agent. Right. And therefore, I need to go get to know the listing agent. I need to ask because that's the closest contact that I'm going to have to the seller.
Right.
So by asking the listing agent questions, I won't go through a slew of all the questions that I
Sure.
might be asking, because if there's anything I've learned in real estate is no two escrows look the same.
Right.
But in order to find out, asking the what's, the hows, what would your seller like to see when you present offers this Saturday at 10 a.m.? Why are they leaving? What is causing them to make this transition? And most of the time, it's a life event. And the beauty behind life events is we all experience them. We experience them in our own individual ways, but when we have those experiences, we can actually take those and use them to our ability to empathize with where people are at. So
Right.
if it's retirement, we probably don't want to be asking the seller to do a whole lot to their home prior to our close of escrow. They probably want to simplify instead of adding on to their to-do list. If there's a financial hardship, we're also going to want to keep in mind that, going in and asking for a plethora of credits for the buyer to apply towards their closing costs may not be advantageous for us to do that if we want to continue conversation. Now, I'm not saying that representing the buyer, I'm going in trying to just solely please the seller, but the important piece is that it has to be a win-win for everybody.
Right.
And so if we can communicate clearly and we can try to get to understand who needs what and when, then we can figure out the how.
Right. And from where you started was open-ended questions. And that's what I love. And that's what I've also, really learned is, do you like your home? Yes. Do you like your home? No. Those are close-ended versus tell me things that you like about your home. Tell me things that your seller may want to see in the offer that's presented to them. Then they can start talking and communicating and feel like maybe the guard is down a little bit. And then taking that a step further, you're listening to what they're actually communicating with you. And then from there, how to properly or to the best of your ability advise your buyers to structure that. And we're given the case that you're representing buyers. You also represent, listings and sellers as well. So I love it. I love it. So I want to go, and I'm speaking with you, I'm kind of reminiscing down memory lane too, is, I've been in mortgages. I think this is my 24th year. I stopped counting at a certain point, right? But, when I started with mortgages, there was not a specific mortgage license. And so I had to, at the time, get my DRE license, Department of Real Estate. And so it's the same license as you have to sell real estate. And so I remember going to a Century 21 and just sitting down in a classroom style with, all those grocery store workers and, all these different industries that people just, and, as you listen and talk with some of half the room, you can already go, okay, yeah, this is not going to work out. They don't get paid every other Friday at 2:00, to come pick up your check. It was very self-aware of, in that first moment that I took that first step of, okay, I'm going to transition into another industry. I don't want to say I saw the clairvoyance, but I could already see some of the people that definitely did not have it in them. And then, I don't know, do you have something similar? Do you remember making that first step? And was that a difficult first step? Even though you knew you wanted it, was that the hard one?
When I became a licensed?
Yeah, when you got your license, that where you ordered the books or took a class.
Well, that was such a difficult time in my life in general for personal reasons. It was, so back in 2013, 2014, I ultimately was, in my mid to late 20s, and I was going through a huge transformation in terms of closing several chapters in my life and starting fresh, but not actually just writing a whole new book, it felt like.
Yeah, so you were ready.
Yeah.
So you were ready.
Yeah. And I think that there was a lot of insecurity because I'm not originally from Ventura County, similar to your situation.
Right.
So I just had this drunk monkey in my head that was telling me, nobody knows you. You're not going to make it. I mean, all of that negative self-narrative that just beat me up. And what I did to overcome that is I started focusing on what I had.
Right.
And if I didn't have the contacts, if I didn't have the money to advertise, what I had was time.
Yeah.
And with time allowed my essentially it was my primary lead generator, which were open houses. You were asking earlier, how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah.
And so because I had time, that wasn't costing me a lot of money. It was offering me an opportunity to hold a house open in which these buyers walking through, they weren't here to visit Miss Meggie Hawthorne, although I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
They were here to see the home and to potentially envision themselves purchasing this home, to live in it, to create these memories in this home. And so I would back off. I mean, I use the term pretty often. I share this with my team. Don't get into real estate and just start blowing your commission breath. This is really not about us. It's about the client. And I'm fortunate enough today to have a team of 4 beautifully strong, competent, sharp women. And having those open houses and even, showing them some of the techniques in which just let people come to you. Let people see the house. Let them experience it. And if it's not the one for them, that's okay.
Right.
Let's go back to that piece of curiosity where we ask, what did you appreciate about this house? What would you have liked to have seen in this house? If it's not in this house, do you have a professional who's helping you meet those needs? If not, would you be open to allowing me to help you find that home?
Wow.
By
Love it.
asking those questions,
Yeah, love it.
this isn't about, hey, when can I get a commission check from you? Money's kind of tight.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a big difference in delivery. And so when I can have people come see the house, and then if they feel like talking to me, let's
Yeah.
talk. But the last thing I want to do is twist anybody's arm. It's one thing I've certainly learned is it never goes well when you try to force something. And
Right.
so just keeping it very calm, natural, helpful, curious, intuitive, that goes a long way. And
Absolutely.
I don't think it's hard. I really don't.
Well, as you kind of started out and you had mentioned, some of the lacking self-confidence, we're our own worst enemy. And it's not anybody else. It's not, I think it's just the capabilities that us as people and humans have. It's fascinating. I watch, nowadays it's more and more YouTube. Yesterday, I watched a video where a guy went from prison for 10 years to making $2 million a month. And it was just like all he could think about was not necessarily the money, but the vision, the goal. And, those stories are not unheard of, yet it's so fascinating that we're still intrigued by them. And I feel like we're literally capable of anything that we want. You can build your empire as big as you want it. It's what are you doing to take the steps if you want it? And I kind of decided, yes, I like money. Yes, I like having nice things, but I'm not the one that I'm like, hey, I want to make $1 billion a year. I found my spot of I do very well. I've built up a career and a following, and I love what I do. But I also feel that like I don't want to be just motivated by money. To me, what I do, what I tell my kids I do is I help people buy homes, whether it's their first home or their home that they've dreamt about for 20 years and they're finally able to get it. I'm connecting the dots, and I'm a small piece of that. It takes, as you know, a whole team to do that. And that's one thing that I want to circle back with you is when I first met you, you were working by yourself, but and you were a rock star, originating as a salesperson by yourself. Now you've built up to a team, award-winning team. You guys are killing it. The theme that I see, though, is that you've always built your team. Even when it was you by yourself as a salesperson, you had your transaction coordinator, you had your lender, you had your escrow officer. I know that's important to you, but let's just kind of shine the light on you. I hear the basics and the foundation is there. Did you, when you started in the industry, did you have a mentor, or do you have things, resources, books, videos, seminars? Where did you go to grow? I mean, you had to learn it, and I know you have some innate skills, but at the same time, you still have to learn this new industry. So share with me on that. Did you have a mentor?
Yeah. So starting out, shortly after I was licensed, I decided to partner with Keller Williams, West Ventura County, and that began in 2016. For my first 3 transactions, I went through a mentorship program, and I partnered with a more seasoned agent to help me. The beauty of it, this is kind of a funny fairy tale story.
Love it.
Is my very first transaction was, I should take a step back and say, with that sales job that I had, I saved every single penny. I only lived off of my hourly. I was making like $19.25 per hour, and I just took all of my commissions and socked them away, because I realized that even though I wasn't very excited about the products I was selling, I wanted to buy a house so badly. That was my American dream, was I want to do this. I want to do this. So I got to that point where I was able to purchase my first home here in Ventura, California. And obviously at that time I was not licensed. And unfortunately, I didn't feel that my representation was the appropriate representation. So there were moments in that transaction where I found myself stepping in as my strongest advocate. And I did feel a bit shortchanged on that. But that's the beauty about it. Even when you face frustrating events, there's always a learning opportunity.
Right.
So what I learned from that is, I could probably run circles around this agent. I could do this, and I'm actually enjoying it in my own purchase. How would it feel to sell this product? Would there be an emotional component behind that? And the answer was yes. So going back to 2016, I'm licensed at this point. And when I had bought my first house, I bought the house right next door to my husband.
Love it.
I had my agent had not prepared me, and I should have known better too. I had so many things that I was shuffling with that I had unfortunately forgotten to turn on my utilities after close of escrow. Oops.
Yeah, right.
So.
And it's a Friday on a holiday weekend.
It was Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
And I just show up to my neighbor's door with a blue Lowe's bucket, and I say, "Hi, I'm your new neighbor. I'm really sorry, but can I have a little bit of water? Because I'm going to go TSP my walls, and we're dry next door."
Yeah.
So he was very lovely, very accommodating, and I was immediately crazy for him. But fast forward to 2016, I'm licensed. I had already sold my house. I had done some minor changes to it, and then thrown my stuff over the fence, moved in with him. And then my very first transaction was selling his house to a neighbor down the street who had just found out he was going to be a grandfather, and he was renting a little 2-in-1, and he really needed a 3rd bedroom. So he calls me one day and he says, "Hi, Meggie. I won't, put his name out there, but I'm so-and-so, and I'm very interested in previewing this listing." I said, "You got it. I'm available this evening if you have any time. Full disclosure, I want to let you know, I'm living in the property, and tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm going to go marry the seller."
Just a PS, by the way, I don't, has Derek ever admitted how lucky he is? Like, I'm telling you, when I've had new neighbors move in, it is definitely not a young, attractive, single female.
Yeah.
It's like the crotchety old man that's like, what are you doing outside?
I know.
You're blowing your leaves into my yard.
I know. When I think of that moment when we met, he opened the door and he saw me and I saw him. I just think of that song, Dreamweaver.
Oh my God. This is turning into a Lifetime special here.
So anywho, I showed that Derek's property that evening, and I mean, first and foremost, Derek had a urinal in his one bathroom, and for as many times as I showed that property, that was just the thorn in my side is how am I going to get this damn house sold with this stupid urinal in it?
It's functional. I'm just saying.
Hey, the dudes loved it. The guys were all about it.
I'm not opposed.
Yeah, you never have to put that seat down.
Can you slide me the address? I might want to go take
Yeah.
a look at it for sale.
So anyway, the buyer walks through and he's very quiet. And I'm just thinking, oh God, he probably saw the urinal. I'm like, oh, be cool. So what are your thoughts? What's your feedback? And he goes, I love it.
I love the urinal.
And I'm like, oh my God, this could be it. And I go, oh, that's great. So I do understand that you're pre-approved and you had mentioned you're not working with an agent. I certainly want to make sure that we put you in good hands. So you tell me, how would you like to move forward if that's what you're choosing to do? And he said, I feel really comfortable with you. I mean, would you be willing to represent me? I'm going, oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So it all worked out. I mean, for those first 3 transactions, because I was representing the seller and the buyer.
Right.
That counted as 2.
Yeah.
So then after that first transaction, well, what was funny is following day, Derek and I get married at the Santa Barbara courthouse. It's pouring rain. I think that day they almost shut down the 101 northbound because it was nutty. So I tell the buyer, I said, okay, we're getting married at 10 a.m. Once I get Wi-Fi in the hotel, we're just going to take a little honeymoon. We won't do an actual honeymoon until later this summer. I'll send over the contract. We'll open escrow, and that's exactly what we did. And it was smooth sailing. It was, it was a lot of hand holding, and there were moments of, frustration, but not because of the principles involved. More so because I was new. Yeah. And I think that's one piece that I'm teaching or reinforcing in my team members right now is this newness. This is like really, really hard because everything that you're being exposed to is unfamiliar to you. Right. The more you do it, the more reps you put in, the more it becomes you start to settle in and you start to get it, and you also have the ability, much like yourself, because you have so much experience, you have the ability to see in the future of some of those hurdles you might need to jump over. Now, you don't want to manifest them, but just to have the knowledge behind it, it changes the stress level over time because you're that more educated about what you could be facing in the near future.
You know what I find interesting in our industry and, real estate in general, I'm going to include lenders and realtors. Yeah, we find mentors. Yeah, there's classes. Yes, we have licensing. We have continuing education that we have to adhere to. We know the rules. We know the laws. We know what we need to do, but it's actually kind of like self-stumbling onto a system that works. And, I mentored under somebody as well. And what I would do is, back in the day with loans, we had to, I'm not very old school, but, my stepmom, she did loans for, I don't know, I think close to 40 years. She literally used to have to type out a loan application. And so, wow. it evolved where prior to all of the scanning and everything else, we would print out the disclosures and I would go meet with clients to get the application signed, Whereas now, I mean, you're chuckling. This is an e-doc thing that they do from their cell phone while they're at work in front of their desk. This used to go take me an hour to sit down with them just to get the application and to start out that process. And so again, I would go and sit down with as many of those sit downs with the meet and greet and the application process to really, okay, evaluate what did I like, what did I not like, how could I put my spin on it. And I find that much the same way of like, how do I do business today? I'm always reevaluating that, right? Because like technology's come into play, and it's not crazy technology, but we have e-signing. So I'm not there at that experience. And so, how I let the client know and when do I follow up with them? And, it's just kind of those pieces that have really changed it. I think where I'm going with this as well is like, I was very hands-on, and I've always been at my loan signings and done everything. And then we had COVID, and it just kind of like, I feel like came to a screeching halt. Funny enough, I recall you and I had a purchase transaction going right in March of, was it 2020 COVID, 2019? It's all a blur. It was right when it was brand new. And it was like, okay, can we even fund a loan? It was literally day by day of, the country's on lockdown, the city's on lockdown.
We're considered non-essential for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That was a shocker.
Yeah. And so like every day it was like we were communicating of like, what are these updates? And then now we're slowly phasing out of what I feel is this COVID. But then I feel like some things have still stayed kind of in this sheltered. Like, for example, a lot more people are working remotely now versus going back into the office. And so we see that. I do see things like, where open houses were very prominent, those went to a screeching halt. Now we're starting to see those kind of come back. So where do you see much right now with COVID impacting how you sell and where that's leading? Anything that's going to sustain into the future?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question because it kind of sparked a few things for me. I had mentioned earlier in this episode that I was very hot and heavy with open houses because I did have time on my side.
Right.
However, when we did experience the shutdown and for those 3 weeks or so where real estate agents were considered non-essential, which still blows my mind, but yeah, it's like you need to stay home, but you the one selling houses, yeah, you're not important. How does that work? But anyway,
we were a driving economic factor, and so it's tough to put that on halt. So
yeah, well, we did what we needed to in order to reverse that, and thank goodness for it. But so open houses were something that were my primary focus. But then with the shutdown occurring, I didn't realize how fortunate I was to have asked my clients after a close of escrow if they would just take a few moments, if they felt so inclined, to share their personal experience on the internet, Yelp, Google, Facebook. So after I close an escrow, I always ask, could you put a good word out there?
Yeah.
And if you have some constructive criticism, could you please let me know? Because what's so important to me is that I'm constantly asking myself, am I doing the best I can, or am I doing it the best it can be done? And so I can't expect that everybody's experience in working with me is going to be top notch, over the top. I want it to be, and I've implemented systems in supporting that effort. There are always external factors that have nothing to do with my personal performance,
right,
that add to the total experience. But how are we handling those hiccups? And I do really feel like when open houses were no longer an option, what I had working for me, and I didn't know the pandemic was gonna, alter the world in the way that it did.
It was just for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
just for
right,
2 weeks.
right. Oy vey.
Right?
You mean years, but okay.
Yeah.
But there were so many people that were stuck at home, and they were looking online to
Yeah.
find where might I go? I don't want to be here anymore. Or, I've lost my job. I have flexibility. Or I've kept my job. I can work remotely. So because things became so online based, whether meetings turned into Zooms or, you know, open houses would not allow for me to have that belly to belly connection with
Yeah.
a human, I actually was able to share my clients' experiences with others all over the nation.
Mm.
And I had no idea how much that was working for me
Yeah.
until it just did.
Yeah. That's great. Did you do like during COVID much of the virtual tours? And I mean, did you get, I mean,
So, because showing availability was very, very limited and it was case by case, every seller, every buyer, every client had a different circumstance, different comfort level in entering someone's home or having someone enter their home. It varied, if I we had in Ventura County, I saw a huge outpour of Los Angeles and Bay Area money come this way.
mhm.
So I certainly utilized video showings, and I found that to be tremendously effective because I was able to get in the door fully masked, gloved, sanitized,
Yeah.
in the hazmat suit. You got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And still give my clients a real life experience to the best of my ability. And I think that in real estate, one of the key components that our team certainly embodies is we are very adaptive.
Yeah.
And so we had to be,
Oh, yeah.
because you can't look at one method and go, well, it always worked for me and now I can't do it. So I guess I'll just wait for it to come around. No, times are constantly changing, and therefore you need to as well.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you talk, I'm just kind of self-evaluating myself of what did I do different. Of course, I'm hands-on. I like to be in front of people, and when you're dealing with numbers, I encourage people. They need it. Last night, my meeting was I had already reviewed their application and their documentation, but we sat down to focus exclusively on an estimate to go over closing costs and what to expect and go over monthly payments and scenarios. To do that remotely is difficult. And, there's a lot of numbers. Some people get it and some don't. And so I find that in person, it's a better experience, from, visual, and I, have different ways of presenting the numbers. So hopefully it makes more sense. I stop, I take breaks, I ask questions. Doing that on a Zoom call was challenging, and I think that was one of my things that I was very nervous even about, getting this podcast going. Is I'm a perfectionist, and I wanted something where, instead of just taking the raw Q&A of us just having a conversation, I felt that I needed to get this prim and polished, spend all this money to have the intro and the background music. I hope my listeners, if you're listening, I don't do any of that. And the best advice I got was just throw it out there raw. And from that, I feel like maybe I couldn't do that had I not had that experience with Zoom, that forced, awkward experience of like, okay, fine, I have to talk to my clients.
Right.
Let me just do it through Zoom. And so here we are. And again, it's kind of outside my norm of what I'm putting out. But at the same time, instead of waiting 6 months or a year or have this delay to put out content of information that I feel is valuable, this is not for me. This is for my listeners, and I want you to learn. I want you to have a takeaway from this. And, it's whether it's, how to select a realtor or the insurance coverages that you should be asking about. There's always some type of takeaway, hopefully, that you're gaining out of this. So,
And it's about practice, not perfection. I think you and I are cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
Where I want the experience for everybody to be perfect.
Yeah.
And yes, there are going to be a number of things I'm not in control of, but I think that's probably one of my my bigger shortcomings is in those earlier years, I was so focused on I didn't really know what I was, who I was. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the knowledge and the experience that I so desperately wanted. And I certainly didn't have the patience because I just wanted it now.
Yeah.
But the more the more I do this and enjoy it, the more I realize just get the message out there.
Yeah.
Don't stay small. Don't remain guarded, because it's never going to be perfect if you just
Yeah.
kind of wind up and never let go.
You know, you recently joined me at an American Pacific Mortgage Summit, and we had some great speakers. I love that they brought in some really good talent, and there's always good takeaways. And Carlos really stuck with me. And the thing about Carlos, he former Navy SEAL, just very militant background, but he really, he trains in that aspect that, they go out on missions and they don't always get it right. So they have to practice and practice and practice to get better, right? But you can practice until you're blue in the face. The component that I maybe was overlooking or didn't really do was the decompression afterwards, where after you have a practice session, you come back and say, okay, what went right? What went wrong? How can we do this differently? And, I realize there's so many different ways to do the same thing. My way is not always right. It could be right, but your way could also be right. And so
It usually is.
well,
That's the Taurus in me.
no, I love it. I love it. But here's what I feel that we do very well is we communicate, and after mini escrows, even mid escrows, we'll talk about what went right, what could have been better, how to do different things. And we're very much the same in that. And I'm very focused on the experience. There's a lot of good lenders out there. I don't want to be good. I want to be exceptional. And it's not just because I know the laws, I know the guidelines. I want it to be that I'm personable, I'm available. I create that experience that took something that could be difficult or nerve-wracking, and I held your hand and made it, hey, let's call it an enjoyable experience. Like, I walked away from a mortgage with Greg, and yeah, that wasn't that bad. I want to have a beer with that guy, and I will gladly accept a beer. Just, So again, and I see that, again, how we work, but I also see that from you going into this, rock star team, I see you thriving as a mentor. And so I know you co-work with, another established agent, but then you have two newer ones.
Yes, and I'd just like to throw their names out there because they deserve it.
Yes.
So my partner, Miss Terry Davis, she's been in the industry for over 20 years, and she's fabulous.
We're not old, we're experienced, Terry. Believe me, I'm with you.
So Terry Davis and I, it was just the two of us, and when her production met my production, we realized we're letting a lot of opportunities spill off our plate.
Yeah.
So we are so fortunate to have Miss Kelly Park on our team as primarily a buyer's agent, but she can do it all. And then also Jess Jackson, both incredible women. And what I love so much about those two in particular is it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that I was new.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoy watching them even get jittery in moments of like, ooh, I feel a little uncertain. What do you think? Kelly's even told me that as she puts offers together, she will ask herself, instead of what would Jesus do, what would Meggie do?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because going back to the mentor piece, after those 3 transactions, I even took it a step further and I invested in myself, which was very scary. But I hired a coach that I had for 3 years. And she didn't just change the way I do business. She changed my life.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
And so I get excited for these women to see that we are a very successful team with all different experience levels. And yet the one thing that I know we all have rock solid in common is we share the same moral compass.
Yeah.
And I knew and I know that whenever I partner with anyone, whether that be you as a wonderful lender, a gardener, a painter, an inspector,
Yeah.
I need integrity.
Yeah.
I need communication. I need ethics big time.
Yeah.
I need honesty.
It's huge, especially in our industry where you would think it's expected and it's like a staple of the culture. It's not always there.
Especially in this market.
And that's where, you've shared some stories. We don't need to, I've always felt we do not need to put anybody on blast. You know who you are out there. And there's enough of us good people that I still feel that we represent the industry well. And I'm proud to be one of those elite with integrity, with confidence that, we're going to do what's right for the client. And it's not focused on my pocketbook or your pocketbook. And we're like-minded in that way. And I just want to chime in of, I've always seen confidence in you, but I think as, I reflect back on you, I feel that you have matured, and I feel like the mentor team dynamic has given you even more confidence. And it's not in a cocky way. There is a definitely a difference, sometimes a fine line between being confident and cocky. You know your stuff, you know your place, you know when you're right, you know when you're willing to take criticism, you know when it's tough to have challenging conversations, but you do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's where teaching those, I think, often reminds us of, as we're saying it to them. I'm a big one. I do not want to be a talker. I want to practice what I'm preaching. If I say something, I'm going to do it. And you're very much like that as well. And so on a side note, I know that you've been purchasing properties in other states and just growing your personal portfolio. How has that been being a client out of state? So in North Carolina, in Florida, in Tennessee, I know different properties. Selecting, how have you gone about? I'm curious, like as an expert, how do you select another realtor, and how has that worked out?
Well, I've taken a chin skid once or twice in selecting an agent with my very own first purchase in Ventura. But in addition to that, I think that it's taken me time to learn how to. The word that comes to mind right now is recruit. The reason that's coming to mind is because I'm looking for like-minded individuals.
Yeah.
I'm also factoring in that many of the properties that I've purchased or intend to purchase in the future will be out of state.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole other set of nuances of, I'm not licensed in that state.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend I know how things are done in, Florida, Tennessee, what have you.
Yeah, even the culture, it's very different, especially on the East Coast.
And the pace.
And the pace.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah. We do a few things differently down in the South, like Venmo, a buy or a credit. That happened.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
well, they're using technology.
Yeah, I know. It's efficient.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody's got to know about that credit. It just appeared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just when you thought you've heard it all, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I got a seller Venmo credit.
Okay.
I'm like, we don't need to push this through escrow. Yeah. Nah, we got this.
No, we got this.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, it's been a challenge for me because there's so much vulnerability that goes into purchasing in an area. And this goes out to all of our listeners right now. I completely understand how daunting and scary and all of the things that come with relocating or investing in an area that you're unfamiliar with. So when I said I've taken a chin skid, I've received some pretty lousy service, and I've had to pivot and shift and clearly communicate. None of us are mind readers. So if something isn't fitting well, it's my responsibility to say something.
Yeah.
And to give people the opportunity to understand where I'm coming from and to be able to apply that feedback for future encounters. And I feel like, patience is something I continue to work on. And if I feel I've given an agent ample opportunity and it's not a good fit. And this goes for clients too. I mean,
Right.
we can't always be perfect for every
Yeah.
person out there. So
Well, and what comes to mind is, my first instinct of looking out of state is you go to, the reviews, right? What's the Yelp review? What's the Zillow review? To get a sense of, are they serving their clients and making them happy? But then I also, just in my own, typically when I give a referral to a client, I kind of want to understand the client as well, because, not every agent is the same. There's some that are very brash and harsh, and if this is the house you want, it's going to could be aggressive, but they'll get you into escrow at all cost. There's others that are just very passive and slow, and well, whenever you're ready, sweetheart, we'll definitely do that. And I'm sure they kind of lose some transactions here and there, but with that, we have to kind of use the fundamentals that we have available, which would be the surveys, the feedback, the ratings. But then at the same time, you have to ask your own questions. And this, I feel, is good for the listeners is, if you're referred to myself, yes, go look at my awesome feedback and reviews. They're amazing. I'm not going to lie, but they're all sincere and genuine. But just because I've served those clients well doesn't mean that you and I are going to hit it off. And I don't want to be a jerk and I don't want to dissuade you from calling me, but call me and get that feel. How quick do I pick up my phone? Did you miss me? Did I call you back? And this is what we should all be doing, is finding the person that represents us right and that you kind of click with, and it's not just picking a friend. Actually, I've got one of my friends in town. Might be doing a little podcast with him if I can twist his arm.
very cool.
I think I've done I know at least 10 loans with him, and he's been dire faithful to me. I've helped him purchase many homes, and one is I am his best friend, and that's what I consider him, as he's my best friend. Yes, I would be hurt if he didn't use me, but I would be hurt if he didn't at least give me the opportunity first. Mm-hmm. But just because he's my friend, I don't expect him to use me. I have to earn his business just like I do anybody else.
You and I had a very recent conversation around that when going back to my next purchase.
Yeah.
You are my go-to,
Yeah.
and I just went, hey, I don't want to step on any toes. I love you to death,
Yeah.
and yet I realized you may not be licensed in all 50 states. So what do we do?
Yeah.
And what I so appreciate about you, Greg, is you give me and you give everybody options. We can look at column A, B, or C.
Yeah, I did.
And
I called you back with option.
Yeah.
Here's what we can do, Meggie. And that's what I want and I said, I want it to be of your best interest. I appreciate you reaching out to me first, but if this doesn't work for you, I get it. You gave me the opportunity. It has to work for you. Mm-hmm. This is your purchase.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's you putting the client first.
Yeah.
And by you doing that and by me doing that, I don't need to harp on my team's production. I mean, so far we're at about 12 million in closed volume. And if we stay on that track, we're looking at about a $50 million volume this year.
Yeah.
That's very good considering that our team of 4 just happened this year.
And not only that, it's you can't sell what's not available.
Exactly.
Right?
So we are selling the 2 homes that are on the MLS right now.
Yeah.
That's great. So,
Yeah.
but going back to, you giving me options, and you have such a unique way of